We have Marianne Brown with us. Marianne is a consultant in Kentucky. And I'm going to go ahead and let Marianne introduce herself and then tell us a little bit about her family.
All right. So I am Marianne Brown. We just moved to Kentucky last summer from Ohio. We had been in Ohio for 18 years, but just moved 20 minutes south over the border into Kentucky. And I have three sons. Alan is 16 and in the 10th grade. Daniel is 13 and he is in the 7th/8th grade. And Stephen is 11 and in the 4th/5th grade. This is our 12th year of homeschooling because we started in K4 with the BJU Press Foundations program. And originally I thought, I'd love to just be able to teach my children to read. I think that would be so fun. So we'll do preschool and kindergarten, maybe 1st grade. And here we are 12 years later. So my husband is a professor at God's Bible School and College in downtown Cincinnati. And we have been married 18 years. So it'll be 19 years this summer. And just so much enjoying the blessings of having 3 boys and being able to homeschool and now living in the country. So.
Wow. It was funny because I hadn't even noticed you had moved until you said something to me about your Facebook page. And I went, oh, she's in Kentucky now. So really, you're not that much farther. You're just out in the country.
No, just 20 minutes south. So.
Well, that's good because we can use a consultant 20 minutes south. That works out well, too. So that's great. So, we have somebody from Sparta, Kentucky here. Central Texas, Arkansas. That's great.
Let me see if Sharon comes back on or not.
She will come back any minute now. So we're going to let her go ahead and come back to the screen. And I'll just take over for a little bit.
Okay.
Glad you're here with us, Marianne. Just go ahead and tell us what you were going to talk about today.
Sure.
Do you remember?
Yes. This morning, I was asked to speak about food prep and specifically things that are fast, frugal, and fit with a homeschool lifestyle. And I think, homeschooling is a full-time job.
It is.
Feeding children is a full-time job sometimes. And so, I guess a little bit of background for me, I was raised on a dairy farm in central Pennsylvania where we had huge gardens and fresh meat straight from our own farm. So cooking has been a part of my life ever since I was about 6 or 7 years old. So I come from a background where cooking maybe is a little easier for me just because I've done it so long and I had some fantastic teachers. My mother and my grandmothers were wonderful, wonderful cooks. And so what I tried to do today was choose those easier things maybe. And honestly, my mom was a farm wife and a homeschooling farm wife. And so she kept things pretty easy and pretty quick too. Something that didn't take a lot of time from prep to table. And so I think one of the challenges for me is with 3 boys, just keeping them fed.
Exactly.
If I hear, Mom, I'm hungry once a day, I hear it at least 5 times a day.
That's right.
So part of my cooking has been having readily available snacks, good, healthy snacks that will tide them over in between meals. And that can be anything from like fresh vegetables and fruits. I had a friend who gave me this little tip. She said, you can prepare fruits ahead of time, like particularly apples. Go ahead and quarter them and get the seeds out. And then just put about a tablespoon or so of orange juice over them in a Ziploc bag. And I can prepare a week's worth of apples at a time. That way they're in the fridge. The boys know where they're at. They can just go and grab. They'll eat apples with peanut butter. We try to make sure there's lots of good protein since that helps fill children up, but also is very good for them and their growing bodies. So we do cottage cheese, like with pears. Something that the boys really enjoy is I try to have their snacks made up ahead of time or something that they can make up real quickly. And actually I made up some, we call them energy balls. And I'll share the recipe for those. But those have like wheat germ and flaxseed and peanut butter and oatmeal. And those eat 2 of them and drink a glass of milk, and that's a really good snack. I also keep freezer muffins on hand, like bran muffins, apple walnut muffins, that they can just pull them out of the freezer and nuke them for a few seconds and they're ready to go. Another thing that my boys enjoy are hard-boiled eggs. So,
Oh, wow.
like yesterday morning, I got up and I hard-boiled a dozen eggs. And then after I've cooled them down, I put them in the fridge in a bowl and they can grab eggs. And then we also do really quick lunches. And so I can do egg salad for lunch. I can do tuna salad and add diced hard-boiled eggs to that. So we go through a lot of eggs at our house. And that's another really good snack. Oh my, I think helping my children to learn to fix as much for themselves as possible is also really important. One of the things you had asked me is how do my boys help? I think one of the smartest things I have ever done was teach my boys how to cook. And honestly, our oldest, for a number of years now, has made all of our cookies, all of our brownie type mixtures. Those are all up to him. And I just make sure he has the ingredients. The boys also have done really good at, when I started them cooking, I tried to choose recipes that were really easy. For example, my pancake recipe is 2 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of oil, 2 eggs, 2 cups of milk, 1 teaspoon of salt. Measurements that aren't like 1 1/4 or 1/3. And so consequently, like our youngest, that pancakes are one of his favorite things. And he can make his own pancakes now.
Wow.
And so that has been a great, great help. And it is not unusual. Last night, I fixed a full meal. We had barbecued pork chops, and I did some fried rice and carrots and some spaghetti squash. And literally 2 hours later, they were in the kitchen cooking scrambled eggs for themselves. So yes, get your children involved. They enjoy it, at age appropriate levels. And it does take some oversight at the beginning to teach them about heat and being careful and all those types of things. But yes, that's a very good idea to teach children to cook and fend for themselves. And they enjoy it. This year, actually, our oldest for 10th grade is taking a baking course for an elective. Oh my goodness, that's been a wonderful payoff for us. He's been making cream puffs and blueberry muffins. It's been great. So yeah, that's kind of what we do for snacks and helping them learn to take care of themselves. And teaching them wise choices too. I think by having wise choices available, our family just never has done, I think because of the way I was raised, Mom made everything from scratch. And we don't do a lot of prepackaged stuff. Not because it isn't handy. It's just that my mom never did it. I never got in the habit of doing it. And so I think teaching them two wise choices is really good. So, but that's kind of what we do as far as the in-between meals. Now, as far as actual meals themselves, I try to choose something that is pretty quickly prepped and pretty quick to get on the table and not a lot of steps. My sister is a wonderful, wonderful cook, and she cooks really fancy stuff. And I love it. I just don't have the time for it right now. Saturdays we do Saturdays and Sundays we do special stuff. But on a standard night, and another thing that I do is I do try to plan ahead. Most of my meals are planned based on last week's sales. So what kind of meat markdowns was I able to pick up last week? And then that's what I plan the following week. That's what we're going to eat off of. And so we do a lot of, like, in the mornings, I get out the meat to be able to thaw while we're doing our schoolwork. And I may need to do some prep like right after lunch, or maybe even get it into the crock pot or the oven at lunchtime. Crock pots. Now, I know this is the Instapot craze days. I don't have one yet. They say they're wonderful. Maybe Christmas. So I don't have any Instapot tips or tricks, but actually the crock pot is wonderful. Now, my boys do not care for meals that are like everything's in the crock pot and you just then spoon it out. They're like, I don't want my carrots to taste like my roast beef and my green beans to taste like carrots. No. So what I've learned is I can at least put my meat and get that in there and get started, even if I'm doing my vegetables separate. I do like chicken fajitas, and so the meat can cook in there with the peppers and onions. But then I take it out and I shred it, and they don't even know it's been in the crock pot. And do it that way. So at least part of it is very little prep on my end. But normally our meals are a meat, a vegetable of some sort, usually 2 or 3 types of vegetables, depending. And then either, coming from Pennsylvania, you had meat, potatoes, and vegetable every meal. So we do have quite a few sweet potatoes, some white potatoes, and a rice maybe. Like last night I did fried rice to go along because I had leftover rice from the last week. So I just took my leftover vegetables from last week, put some asparagus with it. You know, asparagus is starting to bloom, but you only get 2 or 3 stalks at a time. So I only had like 4 or 5 stalks, not enough to feed us, but I put that in the rice at the same time. So yeah, those are just some of the things. I don't know, Sharon, have there been any questions come in about what I've said thus far?
There is actually. Let's see here. Could you share how you organize and access your recipe ideas for meals? So do you have a notebook, or do you have a box? How do you organize your ideas?
I have a recipe box, and most of those recipes were written by my mom or my grandma's, or I even have one from my great grandma. I do have lots and lots of cookbooks that I keep actually in the cupboard above my stove. And that's where I try to do my special stuff, because my boys kind of has settled into just the ones that they really like and they don't mind repeated. And so we stick with them, and it's usually only on weekends that I try new stuff. But I'm not a Pinterest girl, like organizing boards here and there. I just typically use that box. And then if I find a recipe or I'm given a recipe that the boys really like, then I just write it on a card and organize it, according to breads and main dishes, side dishes, those types of things. That's a good question.
I think as you go through different seasons, you'll do things differently too.
Yes.
Now, I have boys too. I have 4, and they're all in their late 20s and 30s. And one of mine cooked a lot. And now he's a regional manager for a restaurant chain. And since he's been home, he bakes bread. This guy bakes everything. And everything he makes is amazing. He cooks meals for his family all the time. And when he comes to my house, he'll say, do you want me to prep something? And I'll be like, just cut up everything we have. I don't care what's in the house. Cut it up. And I get so used to having him around. And I think as your kids get older, they'll come up with suggestions of things that they'd like to have. And for my boys, when they got older, like, could we try this or could we try that? I'm like, I'll tell you what, you research that. You tell me what we need. You can find out where I can go find those spices or whatever, and you help me make the meal. In fact, I've got 2 home right now because of the virus, and one of them's in his late 20s, one's in his early 30s, and I was just so tired of cooking, and I'm like, I don't even know what to make for dinner. And I'm like, what do you guys want? And they're like, well, how about some grilled cheese and some soup? And I'm like, okay, you're making the kind of soup you want, and I'll make the grilled cheese. And we just got what kind of cheese do we have left in the house? And
yes.
let's get a little fun with it. And I had one beside me who I don't think I had ever had him cook beside me before. In his late 20s, he was making soup for his brother, soup for himself. And I thought this was the dumbest meal ever. It was ramen and grilled cheese. But you know what? We had such a good time custom making these sandwiches and soup. And it was a good meal. And I didn't, paper plates, they went in the trash. And it might not have been the most nutritious meal of all time, but it was a good meal. And we had some memories. So as your kids get older too, I think you can include them in if they want something more interesting or to shake things up a little bit. They might want to be included in that, which is a good thing because that may end up benefiting them later as they become men and husbands and dads.
Yeah. My youngest is adventuresome. The other day I came out, we had taken break for the morning, and he had come up with, he took little pepperoni slices and cheese and barbecue sauce, and then put another pepperoni on top and then nuked them. So that they were like these little pepperoni pockets. And he said, the barbecue sauce was interesting. Maybe next time I'll just use pizza sauce. And they learn things that way. You know, they learn what things go together and come up with some nifty ideas I wouldn't have ever thought of.
That's great. So now with homeschooling, how does your meal times and your meal prep and all that, how does that work with your day? Because obviously it takes time. Now, you mentioned taking the meat out in the morning. I do that too. If I remember to, or if I can decide what we're actually going to eat, it'll come out in the morning to thaw. But then are you making meals at lunchtime? Do the boys make their own lunches?
Typically at lunchtime, they make their own. I quite often make breakfast for them. I'm usually up in at least an hour, usually 2 hours before they're awake. And so we do something like baked oatmeal, or we do a lot of eggs at our house. So scrambled eggs, egg casseroles. And then whenever they wake up, they have a cooked breakfast. Then for lunch, it's normally something sandwich-like. Either they will make peanut butter and honey sandwiches, or they'll have a lunch meat, or we do a lot of tuna salad and egg salad. And they really enjoy those. I do sometimes do like a hot sandwich, like sometimes I'll take Hawaiian rolls and slice them and put ham and Swiss cheese in. And then I have I brush on a butter, mustard and Worcestershire sauce kind of concoction and bake those. And they really enjoy those with some apple slices or things like that. Or even like sloppy joes we'll do for lunch. Then for supper's our main meal. And typically when I've thawed it out in the morning, then at lunchtime, that's when I do my prep for the evening. Sometimes I don't have to, just because it'll be something quick. If I'm doing tacos, then I don't do that until right before we're ready, half an hour before we're ready to eat. But I try to do that at lunchtime, and then that leaves my afternoons free to start working on household chores, finishing up school stuff and getting ready for school then for the next day. So
I think that as your kids get a little older, it's a little easier to do that. When your kids are younger and you're really having to sit beside them and teach them to read and all that, and then having to make a meal, I think there's probably a little less time when they're smaller. So you're at that nice kind of sweet spot where your kids are independent enough to homeschool as well.
Something I did when my kids were smaller was I made a lot more meals where I doubled them and froze and put in the freezer. We had a chest freezer. Well, we still have. That was so handy to just be able to pull it out, thaw it throughout the day, and then pop it in the evening. Because when you do have littles or you're a nursing mom, you don't always have that time. And that is something that has changed over the years, where I don't do as much cooking ahead of time like I used to. But it worked very well for us when the boys were little.
Now that makes a lot of sense. Here's another question for you. Do you have ideas or go-to meals for the current situation? I'm finding it hard to find meat and wholesome ingredients right now. That is the truth.
Yes, that is. So yeah, even my normals have changed. I'm like, boys, we're not going to be having hamburgers or meatloaf or any really, really heavy meat meals. Now I have found, like last week, I found a really, really good sale on boneless, skinless chicken breast for 99 cents a pound. And I bought 20 pounds, I guess. Chicken is something that you can stretch quite a bit. For example, tonight I'm going to do stir fry. And my guess is I'll probably only need to use one really large chicken breast. And then the rest of it's going to be vegetables. So far, at least, we've not had trouble here getting a hold of vegetables. So I'll have, my onions and bell peppers and carrots, and I actually put cucumbers in my stir fry, and broccoli. I'll put broccoli in there. And so stretching the meat as far as possible is really important. Sometimes one of my boys' favorite meals, and this is a Pennsylvania meal, but is hamburger gravy and mashed potatoes. So you don't need a whole lot of hamburger. I fry it up with salt and pepper and diced onion. And then you pour milk over it until, honestly, there's more milk than there is hamburger. And then you thicken it just a little bit and we can eat it over toast or eat it over mashed potatoes. Any way that you can stretch your meats is going to be important. We won't be having sloppy joes and things like that a whole lot. Another thing that I do, like when I make spaghetti, my boys like meat in their spaghetti. Well, I'm just doubling the amount of sauce and then adding even some vegetables to that, like puree to thicken it a little bit, just to kind of help stretch it a little bit further.
No, I think that's smart. And I think during this time right now, it's a week by week experiment almost.
Yeah.
Where we live, we went through the beef shortages. Now
Okay.
we have some beef. Right now, you can't find chicken anywhere. In fact, chicken, there's a processing plant locally that they would come in a big truck and you'd have to go sit for 2 hours in your car just to get the chicken. And people would get 50 or 40 pounds at a time. And then last night they just said on the news that some of the processors, they just tested positive for the virus. So it's like, okay, so chicken is very rare as far as being able to find that. So you're always coming up with a plan B or let's pull out what we've got in the freezer. And breakfast always makes a good dinner, or sandwiches, or what's in the cupboard that's canned that you never use.
Yes.
So there's things that we can be creative with. It just requires time and energy and maybe a little research, but we're so used to, and my husband and my boys are the same way. My husband grew up in a Pennsylvania family too, meat, potatoes, and vegetables. But, we've been eating so much that we're all tired of eating these big meals. We really don't need to have everything so complicated. It doesn't have to be
right
that way.
Yeah.
Same thing with the crock pot and casseroles. And some families are great that way. They like that. Mine don't. But even doing things like salads, like you're saying, egg salad, tuna salad, or even just getting regular produce and making a really good salad, throw some bacon bits and some shredded cheese. There is a good idea too. Okay, someone says she adds black beans to the ground meat for Mexican dishes, so that's a great idea. Someone also says she chooses a day to cook all her meats, which is also a great idea. And depending on whether or not you work, some of our customers are working moms too. And so when you shop on the weekend, a lot of times, I used to do that too. I would get all the meat on the weekends and I would prep on the weekends and I wanted the mess out of my house. I wanted all the wrappings in the trash. I didn't want to have to come home at the end of the day and then undo that. So sometimes you can do that. Or like you're saying, on a Saturday or Sunday where you might make a fancier meal, you might want to, if you have enough, double it.
Yes.
Even though you're not used to it. That's a super good idea. Someone says they do mushroom soup with the ground meat gravy as well. I think we all just need to share our ideas in the comments, because I think we kind of get stuck in a rut. We think we have to have something all the time, and it's okay to do something different. It makes a difference when your husband is home 24/7. He likes meals 3 times. Maybe he can be inventive and he can help come up with a spin-off of a meal. Or maybe you can do, I've seen people do, they've been doing Chopped in their, that show Chopped that they have where you have basket ingredients. Maybe you can do your own version of Chopped in your home, your husband and your kids, and give them certain, this is what we've got, guys. And you come up with a meal. And that way, if it doesn't taste good, you can give them 5 stars or 4 stars or extra credit. I think those are some fun ideas. So when this is over, and Lord willing, it'll be soon, what would be some things that you would go back to doing, or maybe some things you might try that you haven't tried before?
Wow. I think I will go back to some of my boys really like tacos, and they like meatloaf, and they like roast beef. I think we'll probably go back to having some of those things. But I have learned that even with meatloaf, there's ways to stretch that. A lot of people will use either breadcrumbs or oatmeal. I've heard of using oatmeal in your meat too. My boys seem to prefer saltine crackers, and just add an extra half a sleeve of saltine crackers. As far as new things that I'll try, I have learned that there's sometimes that my boys don't like a certain type of food, but maybe if I put a different spin on it, for example, they don't like squash very well. It doesn't matter how I fix it. They just don't care for it. But I found out if I put it through my spiralizer, they love it. And that's something that I'll continue to do. Just maybe change the texture instead of just doing just salting vegetables. The other day I did a little browned butter, just took about half a tablespoon of brown, and I browned the butter and put over the green beans. And that totally changes the taste, but you still have the same, you still have green beans. So I think continuing to do stuff like that, shaking it up just a little bit. And that's been actually good for them too, to realize that it's maybe not exactly the way mom fixes it that is the problem, that you can change it a little bit. The only thing I have not been able to convince them about is Brussels sprouts. They just, they eat their customary too, that they're required, but I've not been able to fix them up right. So.
Yeah, that's not a thing for me either. Although my son who does them, he roasts them in the oven with olive oil, and I can't either. But I know they're good for you. So now, you said something about having some asparagus. Do you have a garden?
I do, yes. Now, last summer, whenever we were moving, I didn't have one. So my dad gave me half of his from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
But this year we've started. So yeah, we have, we've got berry bushes like blueberries and raspberries and strawberries and asparagus. And then we're also doing lima beans and green beans. I can't grow corn here because of the soil, but my dad will have to do that for me in Pennsylvania. And tomatoes and peppers and squash and cucumbers, the standard stuff. But yeah, I enjoy canning and freezing, and so
that helps you with planning too, and then having those things available, which I think helps. So if some people are inclined to garden, or maybe now because things are the way they are, maybe this is a good time to try that, and maybe add some of that, mix that up into your meals as well.
Yeah. Green beans are so easy to grow. So are tomatoes for the most part. And what you'll find is so, for example, my husband was raised in Florida, and they didn't have gardens down there. And the first year I planted lima beans, he's like, honey, I don't like lima beans. I'm like, you don't like lima beans? They're wonderful. And I fixed the first picking, I fixed them, and he dutifully ate them. And when he tasted them, he said, if that was the lima beans I had grown up eating, I would eat lima beans. And I think encouraging your children to plant stuff themselves that they may not particularly care for. Lima beans fresh out of the garden are nothing like frozen lima beans, and definitely not anything like canned lima beans that you find in the store. Peas are the same way. Oh, peas out of the garden are just wonderful. Oh my goodness. And so I think, even if you don't have much space at all, or even good ground, like I said, I'm having to do raised beds now. But that's always a good option. And not only is it good for your children and a learning experience for them, But there is something about the time that they put into things that they will say to me, oh, it tastes so good. It tastes so good. One year, my son wanted to plant potatoes. So I let him plant a half a bed of potatoes. And they were very good. But in his mind, they were just the best potatoes he'd ever had. So, yeah, that's a great idea.
Let them own it. Let them own those meals. That's
Yes.
great. So, yeah, there's some great suggestions on if you're inclined to grow the Brussels sprouts or to make them. There's some different suggestions here
Oh,
for those. Yeah,
I will tell my boys.
yeah, and I tried the tomatoes in South Carolina. We don't have much property, and I traveled a lot because of conventions, but I got a couple really nice containers and planted them. And I grew up in New Jersey where tomatoes were really great, and they weren't great. And we ended up with it was some type of looked like a worm or a caterpillar. It was a horned something or other, and they eat tomato plants. And I only had one or two, but it came and devoured what I had. And so this lady just said on here she didn't get a single tomato, and that's practically what happened. That you went to all that trouble. I mean, you're watering it and babying it and fertilizing it. And this year we debated about it, and I just said, I'll just buy the tomatoes. Lord willing, we'll have them, or someone will have a nice garden. But I'll say you're right. When you grow it yourself and you go to that trouble, you enjoy it more. And I think with kids, that's a great experiment. I mean, there's so much math and science involved there as well. Learning to care for something, to be independent, and there's so much that I think is great there. So again, different seasons of your life kind of dictate how you make things, what you can afford at the time, what's available right now. What's available is a little bit tricky. So, being frugal is always a wise thing, and teaching your kids that not everything is always going to be their favorite, but it's still good, and we're thankful for the things that we have. But I think as moms, we need to shake it up a little bit, or at least not be bored with what we're doing and feel like, hey, we're doing a good job. We're caring for our families. We're doing the best we can with the amount of money we have and the supplies we have, and our kids are healthy.
Yes.
But we don't want to spend all day in the kitchen, especially when it gets hot. And then we have a lot of cleanup because we're busy homeschooling our kids. There's not time all day to be 3 meals a day.
Yes.
So that gets a little bit tricky too. So great. Well, it's so fun to see the comments in here. You know what? If you don't know what you're doing with your gardening, just try it. Try it and see. Google, let your kids. That's the great thing about your kids. They can sit there, they can look and research that themselves. And you know what? If you garden and you fail, just like I did, now I know what to do or what not to do. And just like with a meal, sometimes you make a meal and you realize you overcooked it or you undercooked it, or the spices you used weren't everyone's favorite. So you try again, right? I mean, it's a safe environment to try new things. And
I will say too, if you've had any bad experiences with gardening, that is disheartening. Something that I had to learn when I moved from Pennsylvania to Ohio was the things that worked in Pennsylvania don't work here. But what I discovered is I went to the local farmers market and just asked those farmers what kinds work best, what kind of soil is best for that. And that was very helpful to me to know that different parts of the country are different, and your local farmers market people are going to know what's best for you. And I learned gleaned a lot of good information from them that helped.
That was pretty quick too. Good for you in such a short time. So lots of good gardening ideas. And then you said you were maybe going to put a couple of recipes in the comments later. Is that right?
Yes, I will put the recipe for the energy bites in there. I also have a dessert that my boys absolutely love. In fact, I made one yesterday, and they're like, "Can we have a piece for breakfast?" I said, "No, you cannot." Another thing I try to do is choose. We don't do desserts a lot, but choose things that are really quick. And this is one that actually works best if you leave it sit for at least 24 hours. And so that's really good. If I'm having company the next day, I can make my cake a day or two ahead, and it's actually going to taste better when I have company. And I'll share that recipe too. So
that would be great. So Marianne's a mom. She's a cook. She's a gardener. She is a consultant and she is available to answer homeschooling questions and to encourage you. And we'll put her link to her Facebook page. You'll see that there, and also to her website. And then any events that she might be having, you can see those as well. And if you're in the Kentucky area or Cincinnati area, hopefully you'll get to see her at an event, if not this year, next year, and you can interact with her as well. So great suggestions and comments in the on the side there. That'll be great. And it'll be good to see those when we're done as well, people coming back. Marianne, thank you so much for taking the time and actually doing a show and tell with us. That was fun. Now we all want to try those energy bites in your dessert.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great morning.